Obviously, the NFL is a pass-heavy league now, which has created a double-edged sword for the wide receiver position in fantasy football. Because on one hand, it has made what a lot of people believe the wide receiver position to be way more stable and way safer than any other positions that you can draft. But on the other hand, it can lead to inconsistencies because on any given night, one of 3 wide receivers could end up being the guy to put up big fantasy points while someone else is left with a big 0. Yo, what's up, Headliner Nation? Today's video is going to be super similar to a running back handcuff video that I did last week. And in the comments, I had a couple of people ask, hey, can you do something similar with the depth charts, but for wide receivers instead? And because we're a channel of the people, of course I said, let's go ahead and do it. So today's video is going to be breaking down the depth chart for each team in the NFL, and we're going to try and determine a few different things. On that depth chart, which wide receivers are guys we consider must own, or just guys that we need to draft. Maybe somebody is a stash that we should be hiding for later in the season. Maybe they could have some decent games. Maybe they're just a best ball stash instead. And then guys that we should just be passing on entirely. And because there'll be some best ball knowledge along with dynasty and redraft knowledge in this video, I think it's best if you go sign up over on Underdog and start drafting some of your best ball teams right now. You could even draft against us. And on top of it, if you download their app, create a new account using code word headliners and make at least a $10 deposit, you're going to get our 2024 fantasy football draft guide for free. Our draft guide typically costs $21.99. So if you do that, you're getting over 50% off the actual price of the draft guide. And on top of it, Underdog is going to go ahead and give you up to a $250 deposit bonus as well. But let's go ahead and start jumping into the facts of this video. And first up is going to be our teams out in the NFC East. Now, we clearly have 2 players in the division that could be top 5 wide receivers in fantasy by the end of the year. But starting with the Dallas Cowboys, we know CeeDee Lamb is going to be one of the first couple of wide receivers off the board when we start drafting this year. And with Brandon Cooks in Dallas for another year and no more Michael Gallup on the other side, hopefully we see a little bit more volume going over to Brandon Cooks. Maybe he's just a stash. Maybe he's a guy we use a late round pick on or use him in best ball. There's not going to be a whole lot of consistency for him, however, and that's going to make him tough to start on any given week. And as of right now, it looks like Jalen Tolbert will be the wide receiver 3 on this team, but it's not anything I'm super excited about to really be adding him in any formats. The New York Giants used their number 5 pick on Malik Nabers, and it's not necessarily a bad pick, but they have a bad quarterback. And they have a lot of just kind of B- guys at the wide receiver position as well. So really, everybody on this list for New York is really going to be based on whether or not Daniel Jones can get back to the quarterback that he was a couple of years ago. And even at that point, he wasn't super good. So yeah, Malik Nabers, I'm looking to draft him. Now, he's not a must-own for me. If I miss out on him, I'm not going to be sad about it. Unfortunately, I just think that he's going to lack a lot of consistency with Daniel Jones. When you take a look at a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson in a PPR league, he could end up being a guy that you could stash for a weekly basis use when we're going through our bye weeks or injuries. Use him as a wide receiver 3 or maybe a flex option. And really outside of that, you've got Jalen Hyatt, who was drafted a couple of years ago. He's going to be more of a speed threat on the outside, stretching the field. So maybe he has a couple of blow-up games here and there, but nothing that I'm going to be looking to play regularly. The Philadelphia Eagles are going to have 2 must-own wide receivers with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. The debate of whether or not Devontae Smith is the wide receiver 1 should be over at this point. It's clearly A.J. Brown. But Devontae Smith is going to offer you some really good performances as well. There's going to be up and downs for both of these guys. They're going to have games where they both eat, but they're going to have games as well where one might get his and the other might not get anything. So there will be some inconsistencies there. And Paris Campbell is a guy in best ball leagues that I would be interested in potentially stashing, because if there is an injury to Smith or Goddard or A.J. Brown, Campbell could be a guy that could see quite a few targets during that stretch, and maybe he helps us out at any given point this season. season. The Washington Commanders have Jaden Daniels at quarterback now, and he could end up revamping this offense on his own. His ability to move the ball on the ground with his legs and his accuracy over the field is definitely something that teams are going to have trouble dealing with at times. But he's a rookie quarterback, and there are some things about his game that could bring some inconsistencies. Does he deal with any type of injury issues in his rookie year because of his small stature? Because of that, Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson are guys I would take a risk on. I might add them a little bit later in my draft. Terry McLaurin, I wouldn't want him more than a wide receiver 2. Jahan Dotson, I'll take a stab as maybe my wide receiver 4. Not super excited about it, but he's going to have some pretty big games this season. Maybe he's more of a best ball bet than a guy that in redraft leagues we try to play consistently. And Luke McCaffrey, he's going to see some time this season, whether it be in the slot or the outside. He's got some things that he still needs to work on though, and until he gets better at those, he could be a year or two away from being a consistent producer. The wide receiver cup runneth over in the NFC North this season, and the Chicago Bears have plenty of weapons around them for Caleb Williams to be highly successful this year. Now, DJ Moore, he's a must own. This is a guy that has top 12, top 15 potential, even with a little bit of a decrease in target share opportunity. While Keenan Allen is a guy that should be utilized over the middle of the field plenty this season, but is age catching up with him? Can he stay healthy for 17 games? Does he miss a few like he did last season? And Rome Odunze at some point this season will likely make an impact. Does it take an injury for that to happen? Or will he be a guy that goes out there and puts up fantasy points right off the bat? Rome Odunze may be one of the top 2 wide receivers in dynasty formats. And in best ball leagues, I'm probably betting on the other 2 guys just like I would in redraft as well. But someone's going to take a shot at Odunze late in their draft, and it could end up saving their season. The Detroit Lions offense is going to be locked in for another top 10 finish this season. And Amon-Ra St. Brown will be the #1 target once again, and now he's being paid like it. This is a guy that you could make a case for being the safest wide receiver to draft in fantasy football. Maybe he doesn't have some of the same upside as Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill or other guys going in front of him, but he's going to see plenty of targets. He's going to have plenty of yards and plenty of touchdowns, and sometimes consistency just means a little bit more. Jameson Williams, if you want to take a shot at him late in your best ball drafts, then absolutely go for it, because we know he's going to have some big games every once in a while, and now he has an opportunity to step up and be the #2 wide receiver on this team and potentially the #3 target behind both Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. The Green Bay Packers are like the Baskin-Robbins of fantasy football wide receivers. They've got 31 different flavors. Now, who are you going to go with? Like, are you going to go with Jayden Reed? Jayden Reed to me is Cookie Monster ice cream. It is delicious. It's got toppings in it. It hits the spot all the time. Maybe you're like a strawberry cheesecake type of person. Super, super delicious. Super refreshing with the strawberries. Exactly what you want on a hot summer day. Or are you like a low-fat vanilla type of person with no sugar and no toppings? Because that's Christian Watson, right? It takes a special palate to be able to handle that. Maybe you like pistachio almond. Maybe you're going to go for that. That's Christian Watson, right? Christian Watson's not for everybody. There's a few people that absolutely love him, and that's why they go to Baskin-Robbins, because it's the only place that serves that flavor, because nobody else is crazy to lose money on that. So go with Christian Watson if you want to. And then you got a guy like Romeo Doubs. And Romeo Doubs, for me, he's like that sundae that has just all the toppings piled on, hot fudge, whatever it may be. And sometimes you get it and you start to eat it and you're like, oh, this is way too rich. I made a mistake here. I shouldn't have done this. That's Romeo Doubs. He's going to have some touchdowns. His name stinks of touchdowns. That's what we know him for in the past. But I just don't know if he's a guy that if everyone stays healthy, that he has enough fantasy upside for us to go with him on a consistent basis. So he's more of a stash. And if there's injuries, then we utilize him at that time. And for the Minnesota Vikings, Justin Jefferson absolutely is a must-own once again. Sam Darnold and J.J. McCarthy are a lot better than Jaron Hall or Nick Mullings or really anybody else they tried to run out there last season after the injury to Kirk Cousins. So I think he's still going to end up being just fine. And that's why we're going to be drafting him no matter what. Now, maybe he doesn't finish wide receiver 1 overall, but he should be in the top 5. And a guy like Jordan Addison, he's not a must-own because he's going to play second fiddle to Justin Jefferson. This team is going to run the football a little bit as well. We don't know when TJ Hawkinson will be back as of yet. And that's kind of the key thing here with Jordan Addison, because if Hawkinson is like, yep, I'm going to make my return around mid-season, then about mid-season, we lose a lot of upside with Jordan Addison. Now, if we find out that Hawkinson may not be back towards the end of the year for some reason, then at that point, Jordan Addison could become a must-own because we know he's going to get a lot of those targets for a majority of the year. The next breakout wide receiver may reside in the NFC South this season, with Drake London primed to take a huge step with Kirk Cousins under center now. And I'll take a shot at Darnell Mooney in best ball leagues. This is a guy that could have some bigger games for the Atlanta Falcons, especially considering the fact so many people will be paying attention to Drake London, Kyle Pitts, and Bijan Robinson. I don't know how much of a share I want of the Carolina offense this year. I think I want at least a little bit of a share though, and that's why all 3 of these guys are listed as draft. Now, I'm not drafting all 3 of them. Right now, we need to try and figure out who do we feel like is going to be the best option. Is it the volume monster Deontay Johnson? Is it going to be Adam Thielen, who is now in his 2nd year with Bryce Young? Or will it be the rookie Xavier Leggett that draws comparisons to DK Metcalf? In redraft leagues, take a shot at one of them. In best ball leagues, your best bet is probably going to be Xavier Leggett. Chris Olave could be in for a huge step forward as well. And last year, I don't think he was utilized correctly in this New Orleans offense. Hopefully this year, he has a bigger route tree and he's used all over the field. Running a bunch of go routes on the outside is not how you make somebody a better wide receiver. And yes, he had some inconsistencies last year, but he's still a guy that could easily find himself inside the top 15 this year based on some big play potential alone. And speaking of big plays, he's not going to have any consistency whatsoever, but Rashid Shaheed should absolutely show you some big play potential and maybe a big touchdown every once in a while for your best ball team. Mike Evans had a huge season last year, and Chris Godwin had a pretty decent season. He didn't find the end zone all that much, and that could end up changing this season, but Mike Evans should firmly be a top 12 prospect at the wide receiver position, once again with how well him and Baker Mayfield did last year. Hopefully Chris Godwin gets back to being his former self. Maybe he's utilized out of the slot a little bit more often this year. They take advantage of a lot of mismatch opportunities. Chris Godwin doesn't have the upside Mike Evans has, but he could have a much safer floor on any given week if utilized correctly. All right, let's head on out to the NFC West, starting with the Arizona Cardinals, and Marvin Harrison Jr. could be a top 15 wide receiver based on volume alone. Yeah, they have Trey McBride, but you don't spend that type of a pick on wide receiver and not anticipate him being the focal point of your offense. Kyler Murray is going to love having Marvin Harrison Jr. in town. DeAndre Hopkins, Kyler Murray had some really, really good years together. Marvin Harrison Jr. could end up mirroring some of those stats. Now, there is a potential to stash either of these 2 guys listed after them. Zay Jones, the veteran, coming in after being with Jacksonville last year, he showed some decent fantasy numbers with them last season. When you take a look at Michael Wilson, he is a guy that has big play potential written all over him. When I talk about stashing these 2 guys in redraft leagues, Zay Jones may not be a draft right away, but he's definitely someone to ping on your waiver wire and just keep an eye on him. Michael Wilson is much better in a best ball league where you can put that big play potential to use. Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel are both must-own players at the wide receiver position. Brandon Ayuk's big play potential is on display every single week. Deebo Samuel can roam all over the field, play different positions. He gets the ball out of the backfield, and San Francisco knows how to utilize him correctly. Now, talking about Ricky Pearsall, though, who they drafted in the later rounds of the 2024 draft, is definitely a guy to stash. Now, in Dynasty Leagues, he's absolutely being scooped up, especially considering the fact there's been a lot of talk about trades with both both of these wide receivers. In best ball leagues, I'm kind of out on him in best ball leagues. In redraft leagues, though, he's definitely a guy to mark on your waiver wire and keep an eye on him on your watch list, because if Ayuk or Debo end up going down, that could be a ton of targets that Purcell ends up seeing throughout the rest of the year. When you talk about the Seattle Seahawks, go ahead and throw a dart, because any one of these guys could have a big game on any given week. Now, none of these guys are a must own though, because I don't know if Geno Smith ends up keeping his job. I really feel like some of the downward trends that we saw from him last year could end up costing him this year, and Seattle could look to Sam Howell to see maybe if he's the answer and a guy that they end up extending on a little bit longer of a contract. DK Metcalf, he's going to have big play potential, but he's probably the most consistent that we have here. Tyler Lockett, you already know he's going to win you some weeks and he's going to put up zeros in the other weeks. Jackson Smith-Njigba doesn't have a whole lot of upside, but he definitely could turn into a target hog this year, and in PPR leagues, give you a guy that on the bye weeks you could end up flexing. When talking about the Rams, it's Puka Nacua and it's Cooper Kupp, and if you had to spend a high round pick on somebody this year, it's going to be Puka Nacua. He looks like he may have unseated Cooper Kupp as the wide receiver 1 in that offense. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Cooper Kupp, he's just lost a step. He's getting older. He's on the wrong side of 30, and he's dealt with a lot of injuries. If you draft Cooper Kupp, then you definitely have to make sure that you have enough depth, because there's a great opportunity for him to miss a few games this season, and you're going to need to put someone in their place. Puka Nacua could definitely end up staying more healthy though, and when Kupp misses time, Nacua is going to see a buttload of targets. All right, let's focus in on the AFC East now for a minute. And when you look at the Buffalo Bills, I definitely like the potential for Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir this season. Now, neither of them are must-owns in my opinion, and hopefully their ADPs don't get too far out of control. But at the right ADP, I could absolutely see myself investing in either one of these guys to potentially be like a wide receiver 4 on my team that could end up jumping up to an everyday start if they really are able to contribute to the Bills offense. We know we're drafting Tyreek Hill. He might be one of the first players off the board. We know we're drafting Jalen Waddle. His ADP may end up being a lot better this season now that people don't rely on him, or hope to anyway, to be a wide receiver 1. We're taking him a little bit more as a wide receiver 2, but I'm not necessarily just giving up on Odell Beckham Jr. either, because we know that neither of these guys have been a great example of health over the last couple of seasons. Tyreek Hill hasn't missed much time, but he's definitely been questionable quite a bit. And Jalen Waddle, he's missed some games as well. If either one gets banged up in this offense, Beckham could end up being a guy that could help you out for a couple of weeks. For the New England Patriots, take your pick, because literally everybody on the team is basically like a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3 on any other team. They don't have a dominant option as of right now. They have a rookie quarterback, and who knows what this offense is going to look like in 2024. I don't hate stashing your favorite wide receiver from the New England Patriots, but I'm certainly not drafting any of them to rely on them right away. For the New York Jets, we know we're going to be drafting Garrett Wilson, definitely a guy that has the potential to take the biggest leap from 2023 to 2024. Why? Because of Aaron Rodgers. But I'm not going to glaze over the fact that Mike Williams or Malachi Corley, either one of them could end up being fantasy viable players this season. Now, Corley doesn't really strike me as a guy that's going to end up being a best ball type of player. I think he's going to have to see a lot of targets out of the slot to become a guy that we could potentially rely on in the flex or use on bye weeks. Mike Williams would be the best ball guy based on his injury history. If you end up drafting him super late, and hey, maybe he helps you win a couple of weeks, that's really all you need from him. The AFC North, with how tough it's going to be, could definitely end up being a great opportunity for wide receivers to see a lot of volume. Zay Flowers could take another step this year, which would be great in that offense because they need that alpha #1 wide receiver. And when you look at the depth chart, Rashad Bateman, he got that extension. We know they have Nelson Aguilar, and they have a few guys after that, but Bateman could be a stash in much deeper leagues if Baltimore still relies on throwing as much as they did last season. When I put together the slide for the Cincinnati Bengals, I thought really hard about leaving Ja'Marr Chase as just a draft and not a must-own, but people do this with our graphics a lot. They don't really listen to the video, they just look at the graphics and then they make comments down below without fully understanding. So I'm putting him as must own because if Joe Burrow is healthy all season long, then he's going to have a big year. But please do not mix that up with the fact that I fully believe that Joe Burrow is not 100% healthy yet. And this wrist surgery that he had, I don't love it for his outlook on 2024. I like the Cincinnati Bengals. Chase has all the upside in the world. Joe Burrow could end up being just fine. He's got that dog in him. We know he's going to be out there playing if he can. But the wrist injury from last year and the surgery concern me greatly that maybe he does miss a couple of weeks, that maybe he is sore to the point where he has some bad games. We've seen him get off to some slow starts the last couple of seasons. If it ends up happening again, Ja'Marr Chase isn't really going to be the must-own that everybody wants. But that's why I left T. Higgins as just a draft. And I'm also worried about him because, I mean, this is a guy that's playing on a one-year deal right now that really doesn't want to be playing on a one-year deal. He wants his contract. If he even feels a twinge in the groin, maybe the hamstring isn't feeling good, maybe the shoulder's a little sore, he could wake up that morning and say, you know what, it's not worth it to go out there and play right now because I'm getting paid next year no matter what. Amari Cooper had a big season last year, and yeah, a lot of it may have come in a very short stretch of time. But Amari Cooper with Deshaun Watson still feels all right to me because Deshaun Watson to me feels like he's only looking at Amari Cooper anyway. They've brought in Jerry Jeudy to maybe help take some of that pressure off, and I do believe it will. But Amari Cooper will be the alpha in this offense, and he will be the big playmaker once again. I'm okay stashing Jerry Jeudy in like a best ball league, maybe a super deep league. But in redraft leagues, if you're like in a 12 team with a shallow bench, I don't want anything to do with Jerry Jeudy. But in some of those leagues with a lot larger rosters where you could potentially take a shot in the dark at somebody, I could find worse options than Jerry Jeudy. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, the question is very simple. Russell Wilson or Justin Fields? If it's Russell Wilson, is it Russell Wilson all season long? If it ends up becoming Justin Fields, does he put together solid numbers, more consistent numbers through the air than what we saw in Chicago? George Pickens, I like him with Russell Wilson. But if Russell Wilson only lasts 6 weeks and now it becomes Justin Fields' team, George Pickens may not see the deep ball that he would with Russell Wilson. That's when it becomes Roman Wilson for me. And I really like Roman Wilson to take over in that role that we've seen Deontay Johnson have over the last few years, where he's getting absolutely peppered with targets. Houston's offense is going to be beautiful to watch this season. I am super excited for what that team has done over the last couple of years to build them to where they're at right now. But if you think for 1 second you're going to convince me that you know who the #1 wide receiver is going to be in any given week, you're lying. You're lying to yourself. You're lying to me and everybody else out there. This team is going to be a mess to try and figure out for fantasy purposes. If you're in a best ball league, give me the upside of Nico Collins. But in redraft leagues, he's going to leave you hanging some weeks, and he may not be worth the ADP. You have to keep in mind last year's ADP was basically for free. It's not going to happen again. Stephon Diggs may end up being the most consistent player, but is he going to have any upside? Yeah, maybe he's going to get 6 or 7 targets a game, but is it going to be for 60 or 70 yards? Is he going to score a bunch of touchdowns? How is Tank Dell going to look coming back from his injury? We already know CJ Stroud loves him. It's going to be tough to figure out in any given week. So I want to draft one of these guys, not all of them. If you want to stack a couple of them in best ball, feel absolutely free to do so. But in redraft leagues, get the Pepto-Bismol ready because your stomach's going to be hurting trying to figure this out every single week. Right now, the only guy I want to buy into for the Indianapolis Colts is going to be Michael Pittman. Now, Downs could have some PPR safety, and maybe he's a stash in those type of leagues. Adonai Mitchell fits this offense really well as a field stretcher, but I don't necessarily think that he's going to be the fantasy guy that a lot of people are hoping for. You have to keep in mind, Alec Pierce as a field stretcher will still be there there as well. They're going to have some guys rotating at the tight end position, and of course going to be running the football with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor. I just don't know how much volume everybody else sees, but I do know Michael Pittman will definitely be the guy. A year ago, Christian Kirk was a must-own for me, and that was with Calvin Ridley. This year, he takes a little bit of a step back. We know last season, big-time injury, missed some games. They have helped the wide receiver depth a little bit. Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, they're gone. They drafted Brian Thomas Jr., who could end up being an absolute stud, and they added Gabe Davis, who is going to stretch the field. And yes, by the way, Evan Ingram is still there, and Travis Etienne is not too shabby himself in the backfield. So am I as confident in Christian Kirk being the stud that he was last season? No. But I am just as confident in him being a guy that if we draft him, he's still going to give you some fantasy viable numbers. Brian Thomas Jr. is a guy that I would stash in some deeper leagues, and heck, even in some shallow redraft leagues, I'll take a shot on him as his ADP wouldn't be too bad as of right now. We're going to see a new look offense in Tennessee this year, and it's definitely going to be a lot more pass heavy than what we've seen. But is Will Levis going to be the guy? Is Will Levis going to be somebody that can absolutely blow the top off of any defense, but be accurate while doing it? Calvin Ridley is going to be the deep threat on this team. DeAndre Hopkins is going to see the most targets. I don't want them both on the same team, and if you want more consistency, it definitely is DeAndre Hopkins. But in best ball leagues, Calvin Ridley is probably a way better bet. Out west in the AFC, there are no must-owns for me, and I barely want anything to do with the Denver Broncos offense. If you're a Broncos fan and you're watching this right now, you're going to tell me how good Bo Nix is, and that's fine. Be excited for your quarterback. I don't see it. And I'm not ready to sit here and throw away all of my offseason work, all the film that I've watched, all the research that I've watched of Bo Nix, and just throw the towel in right now and say, yep, I was probably wrong. Y'all nailed it there. Absolutely not. And because of that, I would stash Courtland Sutton. I would think about stashing Troy Franklin as well. I mean, he is Bo Nix's guy when they were at Oregon. But I'm not drafting anybody from there thinking, oh, this guy is going to give me fantasy points right off the bat. For the Kansas City Chiefs, both Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy are going to be worthy, see what I did there, of a draft pick in fantasy football. But neither of them are going to be super consistent. All this speed that they've added on the outside is great for this offense. But we don't know what's going on with Rashee Rice right now. And that is something that we're going to have more information on the closer we get to the season. So now Rice is a pass, and both of these other guys are drafts. All three of these guys could end up being drafts. Maybe Worthy gets left out in year one, and it's more Marquise Brown and it's more Rashee Rice before Worthy takes over as the big play guy next year. A lot of things could happen with this Chiefs team. I don't hate Devontae Adams or Jacoby Myers, but I'm certainly not looking at either of them as guys that could end up winning my league for me. The quarterback situation in Las Vegas just is not good enough. Maybe Gardner Minshew channels some of that Minshew mania that he had last year in Indianapolis and is able to extend that and give both of these guys some fantasy viable numbers. But we've seen it with Devontae Adams for a couple of years now. This offense as a whole is pretty inconsistent since Derek Carr left. For the LA Chargers, I'm definitely interested in Josh Palmer. He's not a must-own for me because there's no reason to go out and overdraft him with all the options that they have there and the fact that they're going to run the ball an awful lot. But I do want a little bit of Josh Palmer this year. Not bad in redraft, definitely could be good in best ball. I'm staying away from Quentin Johnston. I don't want anything to do with him in year two. If he breaks out, awesome. He's going to do it on somebody else's team. But Ladd McConkey is a guy to keep an eye on. His injury history is horrible, and his stats overall are awful from college. But he's got some decent measurables. He's got some decent metrics. And he definitely could end up being a guy that surprises by the end of 2024. Boom. Headliner Nation, there you have it. Every division, every team. But keep in mind, this is one of those quick breakdowns where we talk about a ton of players at one time and give you a bunch of base level knowledge. As we get closer to the season and deeper into the summer, you're going to start getting those deep diving statistical videos where we break players down down one by one and dive deep into why they may or may not be worth your draft picks in 2024. But do me a favor, if you appreciate the content here, hit the like button for me. If you're new, definitely subscribe to the channel and turn the bell notification on so anytime we go live or drop new content, you're gonna know about it right away. For now, Headliner Nation, I'm gonna get out of here. YouTube's probably recommending one of our past videos to you. Make sure you click on it right now. It's gonna be that running back video just like this one that I did last week. Stay safe, Headliner Nation, stay healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.